Hello to you all. My name is Terence Baker, news editor, Europe, Middle East and Africa for CoStar Hotel News, Hotel News Now. We are here on our monthly podcast telling you all about the wonderful news, views and data from the Europe, Middle East and Africa geographies. Thank you so much for joining us. As we come to, well, we're already near to the end of the first month of the year. We're going to be looking at some of the data, and we're all data geeks. We love numbers. We're looking at some of the data from 2025 or full year, looking at some of the great numbers of the hotel industry. It kind of gives us a picture of what is going on in Europe, Middle East and Africa. We hopefully have 7 points, maybe 6 that we're going to look at. And when this is online, when you're listening to it, you'll see underneath, I'll have all these charts there for you to look at as well. So if you don't catch something, you don't catch a percentage or number, it will be there. We are thrilled today to have Sarah Duignan in the podcast. Welcome, Sarah. Sarah is Director of Client Relationships at STR. So if one person knows more people in the STR universe, I can't think who it would be. Sarah originally came to STR from Deloitte, Deloitte being one of the original joint venture partners for the international business of STR. Outside of work, she cheers on the efforts of the Ireland rugby team, and she spends most of her time, in fact, she's very hard to pin down, for STR and her own enjoyment in the Middle East. So welcome, Sarah. We are going to talk, as I said, about some of the data coming out of a hotel market in the EMEA in 2025. The first thing that popped out at me, you provided with me, I think, 25 slides. I whittled them down to 6 or 7 that I thought were of interest, or at least I could understand. First one was 90% of the top 10 markets in 2025 with the highest average daily rate, ADR spread, are all in Europe. And Campania in Italy is top. Tell me something about what you're hearing in this regard.
Yeah, certainly, Terry. Thanks for having me today. You have managed to pin me down, so which was no mean feat. So I apologise in advance for that. Yeah, I think one surprise from the top 10 markets when it comes to average rate, perhaps for the listeners, is that the top 2 are in Italy. So both with Campania and with Lombardy. But if you drill down into the detail and kind of think about the composition of those top 2 markets, the 2 Italian markets, it's probably unsurprising that they have the 2 highest ADRs. If you look at Campania, which has a pretty punchy spread of ADR, but the top end well in excess of €1,200, that does encompass, locations like Naples or Napoli, Salerno, and then of course the really kind of high driving ADR locations of Sorrento and the Amalfi Coast. And many of those locations, especially Amalfi, has a high propensity of luxury hotels, which is of course supporting that really, really significant growth. Lombardy then kind of similarly, obviously completely different part of Italy, kind of opposite end of the country on the Swiss-Italian border. But that does encompass as well, like the likes of Lake Como and Bergamo, and of course in Milan, who are just about a week away from hosting the Winter Olympics. So it's definitely down to kind of composition, but also, the kind of general makeup of those particular markets. But I think what I'd say kind of in summary for the charts and for the data that you're going to view alongside this podcast is that there's also something for every pocket. So you'll see in kind of the lighter blue portion of the chart, there's anything from kind of $100, right up to in excess of that $1,200. So there's something for everyone, even if you don't have the really deep pockets.
Indeed. And Campania I was researching, of the 58 UNESCO sites in Italy, it has 10, which is, considering how many provinces there are in Italy, is quite huge. I mean, of course, it includes Pompeii, and 11 villages considered to be the most beautiful in Italy, the so-called Il Borghi più bella d'Italia. And I better pronounce that correctly and not let my wife listen to this. She's from Italy. She's from Rome, and she'd probably destroy me. But it is, as you say, a massive market, very high ADR, and some of those Amalfi resorts. And as I say, we're going to be looking into Milano and Cortina d'Ampezzo around the Winter Olympics in our pages. Now, markets, maybe moving on to our second slide, theoretical at this moment, but as I say, you'll see them on the website. The market with the largest total hotel development pipeline is probably not a surprise. 104,000 rooms, it's probably 120,000 by now. Saudi Arabia. Now, Saudi Arabia obviously has the giga projects 2030. We're still about 4, if not 5 full calendar years away from that. To be all placed. But UAE, kind of a competitor now to Saudi, is not doing too badly. What do you see in that region, especially maybe in UAE, because obviously it doesn't have this new fresh product that Saudi has.
Yeah, I think the UAE though constantly, revolutionized itself and kind of reinvents itself. It's a market or a country that is always looking at new ways to attract demand. I never have gone to Dubai or Abu Dhabi or anywhere else around the UAE where I've not been surprised, pleasantly always surprised about how hotels are performing and the different offerings that are in place. I think maybe the one surprise on a looking at things from a slightly different lens for Saudi is that we're only talking about 104,000 rooms. And we talk about this a lot when we, speak at various conferences, and we always caveat that number as announced projects only, because there are much meatier numbers out in the marketplace. There's, numbers as wild as 500 and 600,000 rooms expected to open in Saudi Arabia. So that's definitely a big caveat. And we talk about the ones that are really announced that are actually going to happen. So that's about 104,000. And you touched on, the giga projects. That's a huge part of that, and that they all feed into the whole kind of ethos of what is being coined as Vision 2030. And there's, a monumental amount of giga projects. The Ria Gate is one, Neom, Red Sea project, Alula. And it's like nowhere else in the world. Everyone offering something very, very different. But the UAE is still a very competitive market, and just a market that's much more developed to the Western world at least. But Saudi is definitely getting there.
Is for giga projects, for whole Saudi hospitality offering, it must still be arranged around the price of oil, I imagine, in what they can do. And they've also pushed back a little bit, maybe because the original idea was so fantastical. The line, excuse me, the line was a massive thing. They scaled back on that because maybe it just wasn't feasible. Why not dream big and then pull back? Although perhaps shareholders don't like that if you don't give what you promise. But are you seeing any kind of differences to the projects, or is it just Vision 2030 is going to deliver a world class accommodations options offering?
Yeah, I think there's definitely been some maybe scaling back. My suspicion is that that's temporary, and it's more about delivering in a more sustained way, and being able to kind of build the new hotel rooms and then allow that kind of demand to meet that new supply. Do I think the line will ultimately come to fruition, or and other giga projects and big projects within projects like that? Absolutely. But I just think it was maybe a little bit over ambitious for it to come to fruition in quite a contracted period of time as was originally expected. But for sure, it's to coin something that Sheikh Mohammed has said numerous times, "Build it and they will come," has been a sentiment that has definitely kind of happened and came to the fore, and been a truthful statement over the last number of years when it comes to the UAE. So there's no reason why Saudi Arabia wouldn't follow suit.
No, indeed. And maybe moving on to our third slide, 10% of all luxury chain rooms currently, and again, it's no surprise, and we're going to go back to Saudi Arabia because it will be in Saudi Arabia. I mean, that's a huge number. I mean, this whole project is probably unprecedented in the world of hotels and hotel development. But 10% are luxury, and there's going to be some ultra luxury ones. I mean, RevPAR is going to go through a roof, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, look, luxury has always been the asset class of choice for the GCC in general. It's not just UAE, it's not just Saudi Arabia, it's not just Qatar, Kuwait, name many of the GCC countries. That has, especially though in the UAE and especially in the likes of Dubai, luxury has always been the preferred asset class or the asset class of choice. And Saudi Arabia has followed that trend. In the short term, candidly, RevPAR is going to be a bit of a challenge. But that's not unique to Saudi Arabia. That happens anywhere in the world where you open a large swathe of new supply into a market, whether it's in Riyadh or whether it's in Jeddah or in the holy cities of Medina or Mecca or further afield across the kingdom. That's going to be the case. So when you open them in that short period of time, but Saudi Arabia, I have every belief will evolve in a similar way to the UAE in terms of having very positive RevPAR, but there are going to be some bumps along the road in the interim.
And luxury, ultra luxury, as you say, might be the Saudi way. It might be how they like to travel. But if they want to attract a huge number of international guests, that will be more spread across the segments. And you talked about some of this unknown number of hotel rooms, which we aren't really putting into the STR data. I mean, so what would that be? It's going to be across the spectrum. Is it from budget up to luxury?
Yeah, I think the preferred asset class for the moment is not entirely. There's definitely development in all asset classes, whether it's your budget economy on one end of the spectrum or the luxury at the top, and everything in between, your upper upscales, your mid, your upper mid. But it is lent more towards those higher kind of tiers at the moment, and less so. There are certainly assets that are opening in the mid scale and the upper mid scale, but it's less so about those tiers. But you have to remember, if you kind of even just look at Riyadh as an example, like Riyadh today has about 250 open and operating assets across 35,000 rooms. Jeddah has about 170 hotel assets across about 22,000 rooms. So there's huge scope for development when you compare those two Saudi Arabian cities to the likes of Dubai, that has 155,000 rooms across just shy of 800 assets. So when you kind of compare it in that way, like the scope to build more of those upscale, upper mid-scale, and for there to be demand, especially in the holy cities of Mecca and Medina for religious tourism purposes, it's the scope is almost endless.
And they have to perform with that kind of money pumped in. They have to perform. And some of the
Absolutely.
hotels I'm most excited in that area are sort of some of the boutique, sort of nature-based ones, our Habitas and Cloud 7 hotels. These seem to be very exciting projects. Let's kind of move subjects, but still with a Middle Eastern um, thrust. World Cup's coming up. FIFA 2026 World Cup in US, Canada, and Mexico. We'll speak about some of those destinations in a minute. But speaking of RevPAR, the highest ever market RevPAR during the FIFA World Cup was in Qatar, the last place it was held, $718 US. What's the second highest? Do you know?
Well, believe it or not, Terry, the second highest was the next day. So
Was
the
it?
second highest was on the 18th of December 2022. So not quite at the $718 average rate, but it was $705 average rate on the 18th of December. So it was kind of day by day.
Does that
They
mean
were
no
the
one's
top two.
interested in the game that day? So they stay at the hotel and spend more than Spa?
Look, I think it's with any World Cup, in my opinion. I'm not a huge soccer fan, although I am eagerly waiting the end of March to see if Ireland will qualify on this occasion. Um, but I think it's kind of dependent on who's playing on what day. Obviously, the opening games and when all the teams are still in with a chance to end up in the final or the semis or the quarters. But what's super important with any World Cup is who's in it. Who's in it from the beginning is super important, but ultimately who remains in with a shot, if you will.
And they always say you do not want your host nations.
Absolutely
Maybe
not.
there's three here for. Is that the first time there's been multiple hosts? It might be. You don't want those hosts to go out too early. That's always a general idea. Speaking of where we're sitting right now, in the United Kingdom, Scotland, who have qualified already, their first game is in Boston on June 13th against Haiti. How wonderful it is for Haiti to be in the World Cup after all their immense problems over the last few years. And producer Patrick and myself will be rooting for England, of course. They first play in Dallas on June the 17th against a very, very good Croatian team. We're hoping Ireland do make it. We're also hoping Wales make it. And the playoffs, I think, end of February, March, is it? Something like that. So anyway, Ireland, let's hope they're in it. What do you have any inkling of what international demand from Europe to the Americas will be for this? I mean, obviously, as you say, you want England, Germany, Spain, perhaps France, perhaps to have good tournaments.
Yeah, you definitely want traveling teams, and whilst we obviously want the US, Canada, Mexico to go as far as they can in the tournament. You don't necessarily want the host nation in the final because that's maybe not as bountiful for the hotels ultimately when it comes to those quarterfinals, semi-finals, and finals. I think it's a little bit early to say yes on the demand side of things because you have to kind of see what the end game is with what teams qualify. I'm just hopeful of not having a repeat of the Thierry Henry moment from 2009. So no handballs in qualifying, please.
Oh, well, let's hope not. I was going to say RevPAR is a major factor in football. It's VAR, isn't it? Get confused with the acronyms. I hope that doesn't spoil it either. Um, the last time the World Cup was in the US, 94, I just moved there and I'd been there a year and we got tickets for the semi-finals only because the quarterfinal was between Germany and Bulgaria and no one with any notion of gaming odds would have ever bet on Bulgaria, but they won. So suddenly you had 50,000 sulking Germans who left for first plane home, and there was a flood of tickets on the market. It wasn't as sophisticated in those days. I think all the tickets went to a lot of corporates, and a lot of people who had those tickets in their hand didn't even know what football was. We got second row seats in the middle for Italy Bulgaria semi final at Giant Stadium in
Oh,
New
well,
Jersey for I think $35.
you're
Anyway,
not going to be getting them this time, Terry.
you will not get them this time. I've seen some of the eye-watering prices. There's even a blog somewhere on our website about that. Another sport that is doing very well in the US, which you would not think would do so well in the US, is Formula One. Uh, I think Las Vegas has held a Formula One event for the last few years. Uh, but not surprisingly, the highest RevPAR in the host market in Formula One last year was tiny Monaco. It's not surprising, is it?
No, it's not, and I think you've kind of alluded to why that might be the case because it is indeed tiny by comparison to some of the other host locations for Formula One. And Formula One, I've been a Formula One fan for as long as I can ever remember, but I was a big fan when it was the days of Coulthard and Schumacher. Schumacher, the first, not the second, as there is today. But yeah, Monaco, Monaco is and all kind of around that Côte d'Azur, Nice, Cannes kind of area. Again, a huge amount of higher end properties. And it's definitely a very luxury destination. So to be achieving an average rate of $30 shy of $3,000 a night, or a RevPAR, should I say, of $30 shy of
How
$3,000 a
much?
night. It's $2,971 RevPAR.
Can you see the event from your hotel room, or you actually?
You can in some of the hotels. Any of the hotels, Monaco is a track that is actually the road on any normal day of the week, much like the Singapore track is the same. Singapore has another kind of unique feature in that it's a night race. But yeah, Monaco is a track you can walk on any day of the week, aside from, of course, the day that they're hosting the Grand Prix. But you'll see from the data, kind of in second position in terms of RevPAR, which is also well in excess of the $500, heading towards the $600 mark, is Abu Dhabi. That's a wonderful place for Abu Dhabi to be. There's obviously, for a long time, Bahrain was the only Formula One in the Middle East, and it has several neighbouring races now with Abu Dhabi and with Jeddah also, and Doha. Abu Dhabi is, in my humble opinion, the most exciting race of the season for a number of reasons. I think one is it's currently the last race of the season, but it doesn't really matter whether it's a tight run for who's going to take the proverbial pole position or the Constructors' Championship or the championship itself. It's not really that important anymore because, with the exception of 2025, but in 23 and 24, the race was it was all said and done 2-3 races before that because, the gap in points was so huge.
Not last year.
Not last year, it wasn't though. But, people would say that, obviously Lando Norris won the championship last year. And people would say that that was why demand to Abu Dhabi was, higher again last year. But I don't think that's necessarily true. I think one huge thing about Abu Dhabi is the entertainment. And the entertainment is off the scale. For 2025 last year, it starts on Thursday night. So once the racing is done, it's time for entertainment. And you've artists like Metallica, Benson Boone, Katy Perry, Post Malone. That was just for the 2025 Abu Dhabi race calendar. So it's as important as the race itself. And I definitely know lots of individuals that will go to Abu Dhabi and to Yas Island, where the racetrack is, purely for the entertainment, and have absolutely no interest in watching the race.
Right. I've run on that track. I ran 10K,
Yeah.
and it's surprisingly hilly.
It is actually for a purpose-built track on man-made islands.
Yes, indeed. I mean, I was like, my goodness. I mean, because probably in one of those cars. Well, yeah, I guess it does make a difference, doesn't it?
It does, yeah,
At
definitely for
that
fuel.
level.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for fuel and weight distribution, it makes a huge difference.
Now, in the United Kingdom, we have our Formula One at Silverstone in Northamptonshire, near Milton Keynes Dons. Milton Keynes Dons. I shouldn't say that. We have someone who used to work here who can't stand that team. Anyway, Milton Keynes, not quite so glamorous.
Not quite, no. Surprisingly,
And
perhaps, or not.
in terms of hotel
Very
rates,
different proposition. Very, very different proposition in that, like you said, the Silverstone track is, by comparison to the Abu Dhabi track, or to the Singapore track, or Monaco, or any of the other tracks, Jeddah, Doha, etc. Silverstone would be considered a remote track, in that it's not in or within very close proximity. It's not a million miles from London either. I would guesstimate it's probably maybe 50-ish
yes, something like
miles,
that.
50, 60 miles outside London. But London is almost your biggest hub for availability of any mass mass availability of accommodation. So yeah, I guess Milton Keynes definitely would benefit from that. Northampton, guess you could go maybe slightly further north, but not sure it has quite the same glamour as Abu Dhabi, Singapore, Monaco.
No,
Important
probably
race
not.
nonetheless.
And as you mentioned, the world champion last year was Lando Norris. He is British with a Belgian mother, so I think he has dual nationality. So two countries can celebrate that. You talked about Abu Dhabi. Going back to Saudi Arabia, Jeddah now is a Formula One track. I mean, Saudi Arabia invests in a huge amount of money in sport. They're going to have a World Cup themselves in 34, I believe. Jeddah is that a market that sort of Formula One might be absorbed into? Like when big events come to London, you don't really notice too much of an increase in anything.
Probably not today or tomorrow. I think the Jeddah market is still, comparatively speaking, quite small, with 22,000 rooms. By comparison to the Abu Dhabi market, which is the guts of probably just shy of 30,000 rooms. So no, I don't think it's big enough yet to kind of disappear into the abyss and not have an impact. We certainly see the impact when we compare. We've done this analysis a couple of times when we compared the various races across the GCC. Um, Interestingly, when you look at the different races, they all end up with a similar occupancy over the Friday, Saturday, Sunday night. Like when you look at the cumulative value over those 3 nights.
You're
Um,
talking 90, 92,
you're,
90.
you're talking about late 80s, yeah,
Yes,
for sure, late 80s, early 90s in some cases. But the average rate is very, very different. Doha let's call it the most affordable average rate, which nobody can quite kind of answer as to why that is. Doha's the second last race of the season before Abu Dhabi, and then Abu Dhabi in 2024. I haven't looked at it for 2025, but Abu Dhabi had a multiple of 4 times that of Doha in terms
interesting.
of race. So yeah, it's a different. I do really think that a lot of the Abu Dhabi piece is the last race and the entertainment
And perhaps the
aspect.
last slide we'll come on to is we talked about Dubai, we talked about Saudi Arabia and the competition perhaps, but Dubai is tiny compared to Saudi Arabia. But Dubai now is the fourth largest urban market outside of China, I believe. Tokyo, Vegas, London, and Dubai. That's quite incredible, considering it was a fishing village not so many years ago.
Yeah, and we're also comparing one city with the whole country. So, I mean, yes, for comparison purposes, it's an interesting fact when you compare, Dubai versus the whole of the Saudi market. Dubai has had a special place in my heart for the last 20 years. I've been going over and back to Dubai for 20 years. It's a market that constantly defies logic in a very positive, with a very positive connotation. It's constantly growing, constantly innovating, and hotel performance is constantly evolving. I remember going to Dubai and essentially seeing Palm Jumeirah being constructed out of thin air. And now there's going to be a second palm in the form of Jebel Ali Palm, which I believe has started construction as well. Dubai hosts a huge amount of world stage events. That's kind of lends itself to the innovation side of things, whether it's Arab health, Gulf food, Intersec, Expo. Obviously, they hosted a very successful Expo the latter part of 2022. Arabian Travel Market is something that I visit and that we exhibit at every year. That constantly evolves and grows. They're going to roll out a World Travel Market Riyadh separate show in September of this year. So yeah, there's constantly something new to see. It's geographically as well. The Middle East in general, but Dubai in particular is a huge hub for Europe transit onto Asia Pacific
It's
and
perfectly
further
placed
afield.
between London and
Perfectly
Singapore.
placed. Yeah, it's perfectly placed, and there's been lots of discussion now about the move to Maktoum. So from DXB airport down to Maktoum, which I think is on the cards for a full move of Emirates relocation to their new home by 2032. So that will mean that there'll be so essentially moving the entire the primary way in and out, at least from a European standpoint and an Asia standpoint, about 60 kilometres down the road.
And that must have huge opportunities for developers.
Oh, massive! Yes, huge. Like there are hotels at Maktoum already. There's a handful of hotels, and that continues to grow. But I think the beauty about Maktoum and the side of Dubai that Maktoum is on, um, is it's also very close to the expo site. So you have that availability of massive conference space, and even some of those aforementioned events, the Gulf Food, Arab Health, etc. I believe Gulf Food is going to do a 50-50 this year. So between World Trade Center, which is 60 kilometers one end of Dubai, and the expo sites, that shift has already started to happen, and expo obviously a much larger venue capacity.
Interesting. And if I could pin you down lastly to one of these pieces of data and information and geographies we've been talking about, what one really bounced out at you?
Um, I think can I have two?
You can have to.
I think the Campania piece, the whole that Italy has that those kind of average rates probably surprised a lot of people. It certainly surprised me, but the range of rates, that you can stay in a hotel, you know, generally speaking across Campania, but let's say it's Naples or it's Salerno or Sorrento, whatever it is, that from $100 a night to $1,200 a night. I think that's a really nice position to be in, because not every location in the world has that, something for every pocket. I think the other piece that surprised me multiple times over the last couple of years as we look at various different pieces of analysis is the breadth of Formula One. There's lots of discussion and rumor and conjecture around there perhaps being another Formula One introduced to the Saudi Arabian market. I think that would be super interesting if that happened. But the fact that you can, Abu Dhabi is probably the most sought after Formula One, arguably, although I'm sure Bahrain and Jeddah and Doha would argue that they also have their own offering, which of course they do. But yeah, the breadth of difference between the average rates on the various different Formula Ones is quite interesting, especially when it comes to Monaco.
Sarah Duignan, thank you so much for your time. We'll let you go back to the Middle East now.
Thank you.
And thank you, listeners. We'll come back to you very shortly with another podcast. Thank you for listening.
Hello, I'm Luke Haynes, People Newsletter Editor, CoStar News, and the host of Top Credentials, a monthly podcast exploring the colourful careers of those working at the top of UK commercial real estate. In the episodes, we discover the valuable lessons influencing the daily decision-making of property sector leaders, and hear about the aspects of their job that make it a little easier to get out of bed each morning. We'll also ask for their views on the latest news and policies shaping our constantly evolving industry, and even get them to share a famous quote or song title they think defines their career or the profession. Listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This episode of The Upgrade was recorded on February 5th, 2026 by Patrick Skillicorn and edited by Sean McCracken. Visit costar.com/hotel news for more and find all of our podcasts on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen.